Okay, so welcome everybody to our fourth webinar in this celebrating the end of summer webinar series. This session is UEB Math plus Formats equals success. And if you would like captions on, we do have those available. They might not be up just yet, but it should be if it isn't yet. But so you turn that on by clicking on that button in your toolbar. And if you're using the chat, make sure you change the drop down where you type to all panelists and attendees. So that way everyone sees what you type in there. And my name is Liz Anderson. I am the coordinator for the Florida Instructional Materials Center for the Visually Impaired. We are a statewide discretionary project with the Florida Department of Education. And we're providing this webinar series through a partnership with the American Printing House for the Blind, as well as the Visual Aid Volunteers of Florida. So we're really fortunate that we're all able to partner together to do these webinars for you. And so like I said, this is the fourth part. So if you missed the 3 sessions that took place last week, those sessions are now available on our website as the recording. And so that is FIMC-VI.org. I'm typing it in the chat. Past events, that should be the correct web address. So anything once, within a week after a webinar takes place, we try to post the recording so everyone can see anything that they might have missed. Okay. Oh, get my slide to advance here. And so again, like I said, if you want to turn closed captioning on, you can do that. The button should look like what is up on the slide right now. And as far as the chat goes, this is what that would look like on your screen potentially, something like a drop down where you want it to say all panelists and attendees. Okay, and as I said, so we do record all of our sessions, so that will be posted on our past events page. The handout, this PowerPoint that I'm sharing right now is posted, but there won't be any other handouts for this session. So this is the only thing that you would see as far as handouts for this. And so if you are looking for in-service credit for your teacher certification or even AC/VREP credit, we offer both of those to our attendees. And you need the opening and closing codes for the form that you fill out to get that credit. And I'll explain that whole process at the end of the session. But the opening code for this session is technical. Technical. So go ahead and type that in the chat. Okay, so keep that handy because you will need that later if you're looking for credit. All right, and so now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenter. This is going to be Kyle DeJute. She is a Braille trainer from the American Printing House for the Blind. And there at APH, she supports other employees as they work toward their Braille certification. She creates and presents trainings on software, agency specifications and Braille codes, and replies to Braille-related questions from across the company. So we're super fortunate to have her here with us today to present on this topic. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn it over to Kyle.
Thanks, Liz. I should be able to share.
It should. Let me double check and make sure I gave you that permission. There we go. I think I might have had to change a setting there.
Oh, good. That's even better if it has to happen now because it feels like I'm getting a hall pass. Yeah, got it. Maybe.
Yeah, we can see that. Yep, there you go.
Awesome. So we're going to talk about UEB math and formats, how to set things up, where things belong on the Braille page, because UEB for technical materials, specifically math, we're really talking about today, and formats, they want to combine to make a better, stronger, faster, instructive tool for the student. Here's a summary in pictures. Okay, that's it. That's the end of the presentation. No, not really. Our first point, we're going to do a summary first and then go through materials, and we'll hit this summary again at the end. For our format rules for UEB math, first off, we use only indented paragraphs. For displayed material, directions, exercises, we follow Braille Formats 2016. The guidelines for technical material from the rules of UEB is not its job, and its purpose is not to give us a lot of format guidelines. And the purpose of Braille Formats 2016 is to give us those format guidelines, and we're definitely going to use those sort of to the letter for displayed material, directions, and exercises. A nested list in UEB math transcriptions we can use and will use to any depth in exercises. So we decide on the format for the whole exercise based on whatever item in that set has the largest number of subentries, just like Braille Formats tells us to. We have been instructed by BANA to keep an abbreviation and its related number, or a number and its related abbreviation, together on the same Braille line. So the Braille user doesn't have to read a number and then get all the way down to the next Braille line before they say, oh, it's in centimeters as opposed to kilometers. And we put a number label for an expression before the expression. So if there's just a little label for an expression that says, hey, this is formula number 72, we're going to put that before the expression. That's something that BANA has explicitly told us to do. For spatial problems, we're generally going to follow print formatting, right? Braille Formats is definitely not giving us a lot of formatting instruction about spatial problems for UEB math. We're going to mostly look to print for formatting of spatial problems. Who even says what we're supposed to do when it comes to formatting? Where do we find formatting rules for UEB math or science? So I would say there are 4 sources. BANA's recently, so that means posted November 2019, recently published document Provisional Guidance for Transcribing Mathematics in UEB gives us some guidance about formatting. The second of resources for formatting decisions in UEB math or science is the Unified English Braille Guidelines for Technical Material. It does give us a couple of notes about mostly philosophical guidelines about keeping expressions together in order to keep them readable, and a couple of notes about what helps to make a spatial arrangement readable. So that's our second resource for formatting decisions. Our third resource for formatting decisions, I've already mentioned a number of times, that's Braille Formats 2016. And the fourth resource for formatting decisions is input from the student and or teacher, paired with our own best judgment. Both guidelines for technical material and that BANA provisional guidance have a word to say about if, because there's some significant wiggle room, especially in laying out spatial materials or following the layout of a larger book or instruction program. If you know what will work for the student, if you can find out that information, then that can be a resource for formatting. So do what? Wait, how should we format directions? Something that tells us and or the student what to do in an exercise. The answer is 5.5. Braille Formats 2016, section 10.3.2 says use 5.5 margins for unnumbered or unlettered directions. Use 7.5 margins for additional paragraphs. The provisional guidance for transcribing mathematics in UEB, so that's that recently published BANA document, says for directions before itemized material, use margins of 5.5. For additional paragraphs, margins of 7.5. That's the exact same thing that Braille Formats 2016 says. So here's a potential print example. We've got check understanding. Which operation would you perform first? Explain. Ooh, and that's all in bold. And then we have a couple of items. 1 is 35 times 98 minus 50. 2 is 115 minus 87 plus 29. Then another chunk of bold material that says simplify each expression and is followed by the itemized material, or the items 3, 4, and 5, each of which is a series of mathematical operations. Then another giant heading that says practice and problem solving. And then another bold chunk that's preceded by additional information that says mental math in a different font. A series of problems, then another bold chunk, and then a series of 2 problems. Those last 2 problems each have multiple choice, right? So they have sub-entries essentially. So let's look at the Braille that we might use for that. We might start our very top heading, check understanding, as a centered heading. And then that's our first bold chunk, so that's going to be directions. Which operation would you perform first? Question mark, explain, period. So that tells us what to do, and it's followed by items that each have an identifier, so they each have a number. So we have 1 period, then 35, that's the dot multiplier, 98 minus 50, then number 2, 115 minus 87, dot multiplier, 29, another set of directions. So those are in 5-5 with a blank line before, followed by a series of items, 3, 4, 5, practice and problem solving. So we could very well treat that as a centered heading as well, followed by directions. And what I chose to do, sort of based on the larger structure that this series of material fell into, what I chose to do was treat this as directions and put that mental math additional information in a transcriber defined type form. So it's set off from the directions, but it really only gives additional information in this instance about the chunk of material those directions apply to. So then a series of 6, 7, and 8. Then our last set of directions again in 5-5. Then our last 2 items, again, we said had sub-items. So our first part of each of those is in 1-5, and our second part of those is in 3-5. A couple of reminders about directions. Directions should have a blank line before them, and usually not after them. One potential exception is a list of answer choices that come between directions and the start of actual items. So second reminder for directions, these are all from Braille Formats, section 10. There it is. If possible, keep the directions and questions, so the whole exercise set, on one Braille page. And if you can't keep all of the questions and the directions that precede them on one Braille page, at least keep the directions with the first question. But if the question is really long, or the directions are really long, or there are lots of answer choices and you can't even keep the directions with the first question, at least keep the directions all together on one Braille page. So the Braille user can finish reading what they're expected to do all together on one Braille page. Last reminder, in order to qualify as directions, the directive text, so the text that says what to do, that directive text must be followed by itemized material if we are to treat it as directions. What's itemized material? So to itemize means to present as a list of individual items. Thank you, Oxford. For Braille formatting, itemized material has an item identifier, usually a number, for each question or activity. So here's a negative example, something that's not directions. We've got a sort of week 1, day 1 daily worksheet. Starts with name, colon, and a blank space. And then there's the series of boxes, because print loves to lay things out in spatial ways that are probably not always even useful for the print reader, let alone for the Braille reader. We're totally not going to follow that block spatial layout. But we have an item that says add, and then has a series of addition problems to perform. We have another little block that says write the missing number, and then a series of 3 series that each have a blank in them to be filled in. And we've got 3 more instructions. So altogether, we've got sort of 5 separate activities for the student to perform. What we don't have is any kind of itemizing. What we don't have are identifiers for each of these 5 pieces, or any of the things that come below them. So the Braille that we would use probably I wouldn't advise using directions, because we don't have any itemized material that would come after the text that says what to do. Since we do have text that says what to do, and then we have pieces to do that thing. I would probably treat these, and this might fit more easily onto fewer Braille sheets and be easier to navigate for the user as well. I would probably put these as items with sub-items. So add is sort of our first 1-5, and then we have a series of 3-5s for, these are formatted in 3-5, all of these item problems, the math plus problems. And then our next item is write the missing number. So that's another sort of main entry in the list, and then sub entry into that is 31 underscore comma 33. So each of the series of numbers is in 3-5 again. And then we would continue that trend for the rest of the pieces of print, right? So we would do 1-5 for write the number, and then if we could fit it, start our tactile graphic in cell 3 perhaps. Again, back to 1 for write less than, greater than, or equals, and then treat these as sub-items, these expressions where the symbol of comparison is missing. So again, directions are only directions when they precede itemized material. So directive text, stuff that says what to do, is directions, goes in 5-5 when it precedes a series of items, each of which has an identifier. When directive text that says what to do, precedes material that doesn't have any itemizing, that isn't itemized, technically those aren't directions. Let's talk a little bit more about exercises. You want to work it out. We would use a nested list format for exercises. So, and we decide on the nesting, we decide on the format for the entire exercise set, not individual item by individual item. We would look at, all of items 1 through 10 and figure out which one has the greatest number of sub-entries, and then figure out the appropriate nested list style based on that item that has the greatest number of sub-entries. A nested list works like this, right? Our first format is 1-3. If we have an entry and sub-entries, it's 1-5, 3-5. Everything the runovers get moved over. If we have 3 levels, or 3 levels, so 2 sub-entries. If you want to go there, you could say a main entry, a sub-entry, and a sub-sub entry. That would be 1-7, 3-7, 5-7. If we have 4 levels, 1-9, 3-9, 5-9, 7-9. If we have 5 levels, this is the last one, but wouldn't you love it if I just kept going with nesting dolls? If we had 5 levels in a nested list, I don't think I've ever seen an actual math exercise that has 5 levels, but technically, because we can allow nested lists to any level in a UEB math transcription, we could have a format of 1-11, 3-11, 5-11, 7-11, 9-11, and so on. So for example, if we had this series of items in print, 4, 5, and 6, and 4 has no sub-entries, 5 has answer choices, that has 1 level of sub-entries, and 6 has both sub-entries that here are identified by the capital Roman numerals, the I, and I. And it also has sub-entries. So that's the lower cases A, B, C, and ABC. So really in this exercise set, we're looking for the item that has the largest number of sub-entries. And that would be item number 6, because there are 2 levels below that. I think I glimpsed in the chat, and I've heard the question before, how is an outline different from a nested list? And I would say that it isn't. It's a question of terminology. So nested list is the terminology that we try to use most often when we're talking about Braille formats. And it's that sort of series of nesting dolls formats where the first entry starts in cell 1, the second level starts in cell 3, the second and the third level starts in cell 5, and so on and so forth. That is the Braille format that we would apply to an outline. So an outline is maybe what we would call the actual content the actual print content, the text, the meaning of the material, we could identify it as an outline, like for a story or a paper that you're going to write. And a nested list is the specific Braille format. It's pretty unlikely that an English book or a writing techniques textbook is going to use the term nested list. That's just how we talk about the Braille format. And the outline is more a description of the actual content. So yeah, you could look at number 6 and it does look a lot like an outline. It is in fact an exercise with multiple parts. Those sub entries that are A, B, C. So if I were going to do this in Braille, it would look a little bit like, oh yes, thank you, nesting dolls. Here's our reminder. We've got 3 levels. So our format for the whole exercise set is going to be 1, 7, 3, 7, 5, 7. So there's item number 4, and it is in 1, 7 because we made the choice for formatting for our whole set, our whole exercise set, and one of those items in the exercise set has 3 levels. So our first entry level is 1, 7. So item number 4 is formatted starting in cell 1 with runovers in cell 7. And item number 5 is formatted the main entry starting in cell 1 with runovers in cell 7. So that's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so that's cell 7. And then our second level of exercise in item number 5 is A, B, and C. Each of those starts in cell 3. If they had runovers, they would be in cell 7. And item number 6, 1, 7. And then we've got the sub entry is 3, 7. And our sub entry is 5. And there are no runovers for those, but if there were, they would be in cell 7. Lest I or anyone else lose perspective, exercises are for the student, right? The goal of Braille formatting is to make the material easy to navigate and intuitive to revisit for the student. It is not to please the Braille format's gods. A rigid adherence to rules and guidelines, it's pointless if it doesn't make the material intuitive for the student. So anything you find out about what makes it easier for the specific student that you're transcribing for, that you can do sustainably and still give them accurate Braille cells, is a viable option, right? Our goal is to make exercises that are for the student. Please advance. There we go. Show you what? Don't worry, it's not that kind of presentation. I'm not going to ask you to show off anything. The question is, how should we format displayed material? The answer is according to Braille Formats. So Braille Formats tells us about displayed material that the adjusted margin is 2 cells to the right of the runover position for the material that precedes displayed matter. I'm pushing up my nerd glasses with that phrasing. We'll come back to that. We do insert a blank line, so a blank Braille line before and after displayed material. This is supposed to set off the displayed or the example material in the same way that it's set off by being a different color or pushed over to the right in print. So we put a blank line before and after in order to make it easier for the Braille user to notice that this material is displayed. All parts of displayed material, including headings, are based on the adjusted left margin. So the adjusted left margin is something that I think it'll be easier to talk about when we're actually looking at some Braille. So let's look at this print example perhaps, where it's a paragraph that says to find the multiples of a number, start at that number and count on by the number. You can use a 100 chart to find the multiples of a number. The multiples of 4 are, and then there's a series of numbers. The multiples of 6 are, and then a series of numbers. Each of those series of numbers is set off on a line by themselves in print. And then a continuation of the explanation says 12, 24, and 36 appear in both lists. They are multiples of 4 and 6. They are common multiples of 4 and 6. And the explanation goes on. So in Braille, I might do part of this as follows. Starting from this paragraph that says the multiples of 4 are. So we're only using indented paragraphs. So this guy starts in cell 3. The multiples of number 4 are : And we're gonna, I chose to treat this the series of numbers that's set off on a line by itself as displayed. So it has a blank line before and after it. And it is formatted in 3, 5. Now why? Now how come we've got this displayed material starting in the same cell as the paragraph material before it? Well, it's because this paragraph is indented. If this paragraph went on and on, it would run over in cell 1. And we figure out what our format for displayed material should be based on the run over, whether there is one or not. So again, if this paragraph went on and on, its run over would be in cell 1. So in order to figure out sort of how many cells we should add to our regular formats for the adjusted margin, we're going to add 2. Right, we're going to get over to cell 3. Cell 3 is our new adjusted left margin. So cell 3 for this displayed material, I would go so far as to say cell 3 is the new cell 1. And we're just going to give this series of numbers in a sort of 1-3 format. Since cell 3 is the new cell 1 for this chunk of displayed material, that means that runovers are in cell 5. So 3 plus 2 is 5. That's where we get our runovers for the displayed material. Then we have a new paragraph that says the multiples of 6 are, and again, a series of numbers that's displayed, so it has a blank line before and after it. And again, this is displayed to a paragraph. If the paragraph went on and on and on, it would run over in cell 1. So we adjust our margin by knocking it over 2 cells. Starts in 3, because a series of numbers, otherwise we would probably just put in 1-3. Again, cell 3 is the new cell 1 for this displayed chunk. So we've got 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, ellipsis, just like in print. Then our next paragraph, again in cell 3, 12, 24, and 36 appear in both lists. 12, 24, and 36 appear in both lists, period. Then another separate paragraph, they are multiples of blah, 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 blah. We would continue on with the text. Math instructive material is really notorious for having teeny tiny paragraphs. It's sort of a paragraph that makes 1 point and then ends, and then another paragraph that makes 1 point and then ends. It is both in print and in Braille not as pretty, perhaps not as elegant looking. It is more piecemeal than a literary sort of English textbook. So what about spatial material? This is everybody's favorite, most intuitive, easiest to use the transcription software for material, right? Alas, no. Things that are arranged spatially for calculation are, so like we're talking about vertical addition problems or long division. They're not everybody's favorite, and they often require a lot of human intervention. But if we do have some rules, or at least some guidelines for formatting them, including Guidelines for Technical Material asks us not to put a numeric indicator in a column of numbers. A numeric indicator is a Braille indicator that says, hey, what comes next is a number. It is not actually part of the math problem itself. So we want to keep it out of the columns of numbers so that it doesn't look to the Braille reader, to the Braille user, like it's part of the calculation. It's just a Braille indicator. So keep it out of the numbers. The separation line in examples in the Guidelines for Technical Material is the same length as the problem. So exactly the same length, not hanging over on the left or right. Here's the sign of operation. It can be inside or outside the separation line. It depends on what print does and or what the teacher has asked for. Lines before and after either are blank or contain only the numeric passage indicator or the numeric terminator. So what these guys say is instead of just the single numeric indicator, when it says 2 numeric indicators, it's shouting, hey, everything for lines and lines, regardless of spaces, is a number. So you don't have to repeat numeric indicators. And then this guy is the numeric terminator, which says, okay, we're done with that thing that I shouted earlier, that absolutely everything is a number, unless I really say otherwise. And last but not least, often follow print for alignment. So print is our it really is our reference for these spatial materials. It tends to make it easier for the Braille user and the print users in the classroom, probably including the teacher, to talk about the spatial material if it's laid out the same way in print and in Braille. So for example, we're going to call this item number 1, and it's 242, and then below that 372, and below that plus 75 with a horizontal line under that, so like a sum line. So in Braille we might do number 1 and a closed parentheses, and that's, at least for addition, on the same line as the first addend of the addition problem. So then we've got number 242, and then directly below that, aligned just like it is in print with the hundreds, the tens, and the ones aligned, 372. And then below that, we've got the plus symbol, and that's way over so that all the number indicators will be aligned. Please remember that a space following a numeric indicator still initiates numeric mode. So even though there's a space here right after the numeric indicator, we still know that this is a 7 and this is a 5. Then our separation line is the same length as the whole problem. I didn't have any input from a teacher or student for this transcription, and so I chose to follow print for making the summary line long enough that the plus is also encompassed in it, right? So the plus is actually over the line, just like it is in print. And I've managed to avoid there being a numeric indicator in any of the columns of numbers, right? So here's a column that's just numeric indicators. My first transcription of this definitely had a numeric indicator unspaced from the 7.5, but that would have put the numeric indicator in the hundreds column and given the Braille reader some misleading information that maybe the numeric indicator is part of the hundreds. Now the numeric indicator with all the other numeric indicators is just a Braille indicator. Come on, slide. Hey, let's look at another example. This is one of my least favorite things to transcribe in Braille is long division. Mostly just because I end up using the space bar a lot to get my Braille cells to move over, and I end up getting a crick in my neck from looking back and forth at the print and saying, wait, is that where that is? Because I obviously didn't do a very good job of learning long division in elementary school. So I have to be really careful to follow exactly what the print is doing, because I'm not sure that I always understand in the moment exactly what's happening in the calculation. So what we've done for this one is use a numeric passage indicator. So remember we said for spatial material, the line before and after need to be blank or contain only the numeric passage indicator or only the numeric terminator. And using this numeric passage, that lets us not have numeric indicators in amongst the calculation over here. We did use, and this is something that Guidelines for Technical Material specifically says, we did use a numeric indicator for the identifier, and that helps to set it off from the actual calculation. So we've got number 7, period. And here's a suggestion. We would suggest we put the identifier on the line with the divisor. A lot, well, different from how it is in print. So this part where the actual sort of division sign is, the numbers that are below the quotient line, that's where I would suggest putting the identifier, because that's where the calculation starts. That's where we would ask the student to start reading here on this line so that they could say, okay, 3 is going into 178. Now we followed print for alignment of the numbers. 59 is above the 78, 59 is above the 78. We've got a minus, 15. We followed print for how long the separation lines are. This separation line includes the minus sign as well as the 1, 5 and the 2 below, right? So 17 minus 15 is 2. And this separation line does not extend over the 8. We followed suit in Braille. This separation line does not extend over the 8. Then minus 27, so minus 27. Very convenient to be in a numeric passage. We don't have to worry about where our numeric indicators go in here. Separation line under the minus 27. and a number 1. Then we're all done with that problem, so we terminate numeric mode so we can get back to whatever else is happening in the exercise. So some systemic considerations, not just at a cell level, but when we're thinking about the whole project or series of transcriptions. Some of those systemic considerations include it is best to, and we need to be careful too for ourselves and everybody else, identify the code. Let's just be extra super careful to say to the customer or to the person who's assigning it to you on the title page of the transcription, if you're going to make such a thing, with any proofreader that you use or fellow transcriber, in any records that you keep for historical purposes, identify what code a transcription was produced using. The scuttlebutt is that BANA is working on providing consistent terms for codes used. So BANA is working on a publication saying something like, please everybody try to use this term for when we're using Nemeth within UEB contexts. And please everybody try to use this term when we're using all UEB for math and science. So that we can have those sort of consistent terms on communications with a customer, communications with someone who's assigning you work, on title pages, with proofreaders, and in our records. And we don't have to have a myriad of terms, right? Because across the country, we sometimes use different terms to talk about straight UEB or all UEB or UEB math or UEB science. Or conversely, sometimes we say encapsulated Nemeth or Nemeth within UEB contexts or Nemeth and UEB. That's just a lot of terms. And BANA is working up on coming with some consistent ones. But whatever you do, please make some kind of record of what codes you're using. Other systemic concern is just in always cells first, then formats, right? There's no point in having really lovely format decisions. If the symbols aren't correct, then that can throw off the trajectory for your entire formatting. We have to have the appropriate Braille cells that we're going to keep that are accurate, that are a perfect representation of the print. I know perfect is a loaded word, but as close as we can get, our cells are 100% accurate. Our Braille symbols are 100% accurate before we start applying formatting. Because once our cells are accurate, we know exactly how much space the Braille is going to take up. And then we can start deciding on runovers, Braille page breaks, heading placements, etc. What else? What else is there even to think about? That's it, right? You can do everything now. No, but other than the specific formats we've talked about, how should we format everything else? Braille formats. So we already specifically said that displayed material, directions, and exercises are formatted according to Braille Formats 2016. Also according to Formats 2016 are page numbers. Both print and Braille page numbers are formatted according to Braille Formats 2016. Headings, lists, tables, boxes. We don't have UEB math specific instructions or guidelines for any of these things. We follow Braille Formats 2016 for illustrations and where they get placed, and also tactographic guidelines, so on and so forth. For everything else, Braille Formats 2016 really is probably our most useful formatting reference. Please remember that BANA has posted Braille Formats 2016 online in an HTML format. So if you go to the Braille Formats 2016 page from BANA, then you can you can choose to open the HTML format, and it has links. You can look at it from anywhere is the nice thing about that. You don't have to have the PDF or your printed out Braille formats. Any additional resources? This information, is it summarized somewhere? Well, yes, in this presentation, and also on Quizlet. If you ever use the Quizlet flashcards service or application, there's a set of flashcards made by Braille Trainer, that's me, titled UEB Technical Math Formats. It's a series of questions and answers about the things we've covered here. And APH's Braille Improvement Department hosts a crib sheet of formatting essentials for math in UEB. I think I glimpsed some conversation in the chat about sharing some of this material and posting, we'll make sure that whatever version of this material gets shared out with you, these links to flashcards and this link to the crib sheet of formatting essentials for math in UEB gets included. So you have easy access to those links to resources. So again, that beautiful summary, our formatting rules, that word always makes me nervous, but let's do it. The formatting rules for UEB math include, we use only indented paragraphs. Displayed material, directions, exercises, we have been explicitly told to follow Braille Formats 2016. For exercises, we use a nested list to any depth, and we decide on how deep we go based on the item in the exercise set that has the largest number of subentries. We keep an abbreviation and its related number on the same Braille line, so 2FT for feet, that kind of thing. Those should stay on one Braille line together because the FT really determines what the 2 means. Penultimate. So this is something that doesn't come up often enough that we delved into a lot of examples, but if there were a number label, not an item number, but like a number label, this is always going to be called formula number 72. If there was such a thing for an expression, we put that in Braille before, to the left, at the beginning of the expression. It leapfrogs over the math expression in Braille. For spatial problems, we're going to generally follow print for formatting. We're going to generally use the layout of print as a map for how our spatial problems should be laid out. Hooray, it's question time.
Hi, well, I know there was one question asked by Lucia Hasty. So she was asking if you could revisit the statement from the activity page with images. It was counting 6 and a clock and how to treat the tactile graphics. And Lucia, if you want to add anything, I can give you the microphone too.
So we're talking about, I think, this print example on the right.
I believe so, yes. Yeah, so how you would address the counting 6 and the clock there within that.
Gee, I wonder why Lucia might have asked that question. Those guys are fabulous candidates for tactile graphics. I wouldn't transcribe them in any way other than doing tactile graphics. If there's input to the contrary, I would be interested to hear it. But it's to the best of my understanding, both the tens sticks drawings and the ones cubes, those are, it is not appropriate, it is not especially helpful to represent those using any kind of Braille cells. So we would use tactile graphics to draw those. And similarly for the clock, it is not appropriate to try and use a series of Braille cells or, heaven forbid, UEB line mode to do something as complex and deeply spatial as a clock. So there are specific guidelines for both of those things in the tactile graphic guidelines. Both of those, there are specific guidelines for drawing a clock, and there are specific guidelines from the tactile graphic guidelines for drawing tens sticks and ones cubes.
So is there anything special when you're doing the Braille, though, to indicate, you know, that anything around those tactile graphics that you would need to do differently? If that makes sense.
Maybe. So there's no, I'm trying to think if there's a special sort of transcriber's note that we should include in either one of those. The 10 sticks and the cubes are going to be simple, like raised line images, which of course we have to make large enough for the finger to differentiate, right? The user, the reader, needs to be able to count each of those individual squares, even in the tens sticks. And I'll tell you what, that makes those graphics annoyingly large, especially if we're spur wheeling, right? We have to leave a significant amount of space, in empty space in those squares in order to really have them be distinguishable tactually. For the clock, we don't use numeric indicators in the actual numbers in the clock. And we use a really special like solid line as opposed to dashed line to distinguish the hour hand from the minute hand. And that stuff could be explained in a transcriber's note if you wanted to do a quick description of, the shorter hand is solid in Braille. Oh, and we're talking about where maybe, okay, so, oopsie, sorry. Come back, slide. That's not what I wanted you to do. If we're going to talk about where those graphics actually fall on the page, if they would fit, I would be inclined to put them in the same place as the other pieces that are exercises. So for this first part, we did 1, 5, and then we did 5 plus 5 equals blank in 3, 5. I would be inclined to follow that same format for the graphic. So write the number would be in 1, 5, and then the tactographic could probably start in cell 3, though I know there is, and I'm looking for some chat confirmation. I know that there is some argument to always put tactographics in cell 1. And that's not wrong. I mean, just like we said for systemic considerations, it is more important to have your tactographic be 100% accurate than to have it in exactly the right place on the page. Similarly, it is much more important that your tactographic be legible than that it be indented or not indented just the right amount. So let's assume that your tactographic is exactly the right size, you followed all of the tactographic guidelines, then finally we can advance to debating whether that tactographic should be in cell 1 so the Braille reader doesn't miss it, or if it should be formatted like other Braille material and indented in the sort of nested list style that we talked about.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it looks like that answered Lucia's question.
Good. Yeah, I like those, and it hurt my heart not to include in our actual discussed Braille transcriptions here the tactographics for those. But it's just indention formatting that I would like to talk about. And like I said, for tactographics, especially when they get so huge, that is not the primary consideration. Any other burning questions?
I don't see any now, but I do know, I understand with some of the attendees wanting to have some kind of handout, especially to be able to look at the examples. So is there a way that we could get something just kind of bare bones basic that has the examples in there so they can, or even possibly the whole thing, I don't know, but
sure.
Yeah.
Definitely as soon as we're finished here, and I don't know why I forgot about this earlier, but I can send you a PDF of the whole ding dong thing.
Okay.
And some notes that can go, and I'll make sure that the links are active in that PDF.
Okay, perfect, awesome. Yeah, I think that'll be helpful for people that want to go back and have something to reference for sure.
Good. I did see a question about spatial material, just hang out in the chat, about the sign of operation. This is a very astute question about what the guidelines for technical material says about spatial material. So let's see if we can't pull up one of those examples so I can at least point to something. What I did with the spatial material example 1, the series of 3 addends and then the summary line or the sum line at the bottom, what I did with these is follow print for the placement of the sign of operation and also follow print for the extent of the sum line. There's some notes in I want to say guidelines for technical material about an instructional technique of putting this plus sign over here immediately to the right or after space to the right of the first addend, with the reasoning that the Braille readers gets to go across the whole first line and say, okay, this is item number 1, here's my first part of it, and then if they keep reading, if this little suckaroony were up here, the Braille reader would also get the information that this is a addition problem. And they wouldn't have to read a whole nother line and then get to the next line before they learned that, right? Because we know the Braille reader is not looking at this whole shebang all at once the way that the print reader might be. So yeah, I think that falls into the category of, if the teacher or student gives input that is the most useful instructional technique, and that works for the student, then you can do that. You can move the plus sign up to the right of the first addend, even though it doesn't appear there in print. That's not something I would be comfortable doing as a transcriber who doesn't have access to the student or the teacher directly, but it's not wrong. Any other burning questions?
Oh, I just saw, so it looks like that question, not everyone could see what was specifically being answered. So the question itself was, can the sign of operation be placed directly to the right of the top number in a spatial layout instead of drop down? So that's what Kyle was answering.
This doesn't mean you're never allowed to ask questions ever again, but I do want to take a moment to make sure and I say thank you for listening to me and coming into my home via virtual. If you need to contact me, you can certainly email me at kdjute@aph.org, and everybody is always welcome to contact APH customer support to be directed to Braille answers or to ask any other questions about APH materials, resources, people, etc.
Hey, awesome. Thank you, Kyle, for that presentation. I see some of the people in the chat saying, yeah, this was really helpful. I think because people are still kind of getting a handle on UEB for technical materials, so it's nice to have the practical examples to use when they're creating materials for students. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Yeah, Sherry's saying this helped her understand more UEB with math. So yeah, that's awesome. All right. So with that, I am going to, so Hallie is talking about the Braille Format 2016. If you want a print copy of that, I believe we have quite a few. You can go to our loan library request form and ask for that, and we'll send it to you. So you don't have to, destroy your printer trying to print out a massive document like that. So you can always request that from us at FIMC. All right, so I am going to take over and switch to our final slides here. Okay. All right, so as usual with all of our webinars, we ask our participants to complete a very quick 4-question survey. These are questions that the Florida Department of Education asked us to put out there to our participants, and then we report that information back to them. And we also use that information to make sure that what we're providing to you is useful and helpful. So please fill out that evaluation. We have the QR code there if you can access that. The survey link is always on our events page on our website. And we also have a bit.ly if you're one of those kinds of people, and that is FIMC-eval. So be sure to fill that out. And we are doing, for this webinar series, we are doing a giveaway to 3 people who complete the evaluation for each session. So I'm gonna leave that open to the end of this week to give everyone the opportunity to fill that evaluation out. And then early next week, I'll be sending out emails to the people, the lucky winners who get to pick some giveaways that are related to everything that we've been talking about in these sessions. So that's a little extra motivation for you to make sure you do that evaluation for us. And so next, the part that I'm sure many of you are very interested in is the in-service credit. So our closing code is materials. So M-A-T, ooh, hold on, I'm gonna type that in the chat. So closing code is materials, M-A-T-E-R-I-A-L-S. And so, Hallie, do the evaluation collect your names? No. Yeah, so we want the evaluation to be anonymous, which is why they're separated from the in-service credit survey. We know with the in-service credit survey, we definitely need your information, but we do want people to be able to be as open and, you know, give us whatever feedback they want. So evaluations are always anonymous. Oh, that's a good, wait a minute. So maybe they're not. I need to go back and check that. Let me check on that, Hallie, because I think there's some kind of way around that. But anywho, so with the in-service credit, so you've got your opening and your closing code. So what you need to do is fill out this survey here. So it's FIMC-VI.org/events. And we also have our bit.ly, which is, if you've been attending our webinars last week, this is actually a new link now. We've created a little bit of a new process. So make sure you use this updated QR code or this updated bit.ly or the updated link on our website. The one that we had up last week is no longer valid. And we do also have for this webinar series, we are giving up to an additional 2 points if you complete a quiz on our Canvas site. So if you are on that site, that's for people who are in Florida, serving our students across the state. You can go in there and find the quiz that's specific to this session and fill it out, and we will get a certificate for you for the points that you earn. And so if you're not on Canvas and you're in Florida, you can email me at eanderson@fimcvi.org to be added. Okay. And so we do have one more session coming up in this series. It's tomorrow at noon, and it's going to be with Lucia Hasty. She presented for us last week, and she's presenting again tomorrow. And the topic will be producing daily classroom materials. If you have not registered for that yet, you can find the session on our events page on our website. So go ahead and check that out if you have not already. And that is it for today. There's our address and our toll-free number, our website, and our local phone number. Any way that you want to get in touch with us, we are around and available to help you however we can. And so thank you all so much for joining us and participating in this webinar. And thank you again to Kyle for presenting on this super helpful topic, and our captioner providing the captions to make sure that everything is accessible. And so I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and we see you tomorrow at lunch. So bring your lunch and we'll have a lunch break together. Okay? All right, thank you all so much.